Welcome to the Blockade Runner podcast number 128. My name is John. With me is Ryan.
Good morning.
Yeah, and we're back from fresh off our final Rise of Skywalker trailer reaction episode and trailer reaction week, I would say.
Yeah.
That's what a lot of the conversation has been about, and I find myself pulling up that trailer and watching it pretty frequently as well. So, yeah, it's been kind of dominating things in a very good way for the last few days. But we're back, and we're going to talk a little bit more about the trailer. We recorded that episode like minutes after it was posted.
Mm-hmm.
And since then, I've just, engaged in a lot of conversation about the trailer. I've listened to other shows talk about the trailer, and inevitably there's just some kind of interesting stuff that's popped up that we missed, I think, and then also just, certain things we talked about. I'm like, oh, well, what if it's a little different than that, So I just thought it would be a good idea to kind of revisit that here at the start of the show. And then there's some toys and comics news that we want to talk about as well as Comic-Con Paris, I guess, was going on. I did not realize that until the reveal started to happen. But yeah, Comic-Con Paris has been going on as well. So we'll talk a little bit about some of those things too.
Yeah.
All right. So let's just jump in and talk about some updated trailer thoughts for that final trailer. Ryan, first thing for me is I feel more and more like that shot of Rey jumping across the chasm or whatever it is there on that jungle planet, and then sort of landing on the inside of the Star Destroyer or whatever it is. I feel more and more like that is actually what we're going to see in the movie, and not just like clever editing in the trailer.
What makes you think that?
Well, so I've heard other people talking about that, or seen other people talking about that a little bit as well, and it's just that I think the big thing is like the more I watch it, it just seems so seamless and smooth that it just feels weird that there would be two shots like that in the movie where they would line up so well. Like it's like perfect the way it lines up like that. And also it doesn't seem like a very movie trailer thing to do either. Like when I don't know, I can't really remember seeing something like that in a movie trailer where it was like, well, we have a character and she jumps, so let's just do this real weird thing where, she jumps from one place, lands in another. I mean, they certainly could, It's not like it would be the strangest thing if they did, but I don't know. I just feel like it's some weird Force stuff, the more I think about it and the more I hear other people kind of discuss it and stuff like that.
Yeah. I think... Do you think it's like a Force vision type thing? Or like an actual montage in the film? Or is she like jumping from planet to planet, or like what's happening here?
I hope it's not that. I hope it's not planet to planet. But no, I think it could be some kind of montage, I suppose. But if it is really what we're going to see on screen, then I assume it's like a vision, where I guess she would be on that jungle planet, but like feeling like or seeing her surroundings differently, I don't know. It's just like, I don't know exactly how to explain it or what they would be trying to do with it other than it's not quite reality, So I don't think she could actually, I hope she couldn't travel from one place to another through the Force like that. But to see herself there, I don't know. And the thing about it is like, I guess I don't want to say any more than that. Like I've read some speculation / spoiler type stuff like a year ago that relates to Force weirdness, and it was super not vague, but it was like really weird and hard to understand like what it even meant. And it was one of those things where I was like, oh, we're so far away from the movie, and this seems like who knows what this even is, and then because I don't really read spoilers at all. Like, I don't search out that stuff. I don't go to the sites that post that stuff, really. So it's not like I'm out there looking for spoilers, and I know really absolutely nothing about this movie, but like one of 2 or 3 things that I have seen spoiler-wise relates to some kind of Force weirdness as far as like Force visions and stuff goes. But like, it was so long ago when I read it, you know what I mean? And even then I was like, I'm going to kind of take this with a grain of salt or whatever. But then I saw the cover of the art of The Rise of Skywalker, and I was like, well, that's kind of weird because they don't really seem to be in the same place, and why are they a reflection? And it's like, seems like some kind of Force weirdness there, right? Mm-hmm. And then this kind of feels like some kind of Force weirdness. So, yeah. Okay. I guess I'll just say that. Well, but you know what? Unrelated to the spoilery thing that I may or may not know, or that may or may not have anything to do with this movie, I don't think it's the Death Star that she's on. I think it's that Star Destroyer on Jakku. But she's totally wearing her Rise of Skywalker outfit. Mm-hmm. So why they would want to place her back on that Death Star, on that Star Destroyer on Jakku, like in her mind or whatever, I don't know. But I feel like that's what it very well could be. And if that's the case, then I think it's some kind of Force thing for sure, so.
I think it's just like a sweet Rocky style training montage. We're gonna get some like upbeat, like John Williams, like his version of Eye of the Tiger, like a lot of like violins happening, and yeah, that's what it is.
Okay. Maybe Leia sends her like planet hopping all over the galaxy for her Force training, and they have to show that quickly. Could be. I don't know. Nah. So,
no idea.
Yeah, this is as long as we are hopefully able to avoid spoilers about this kind of thing. This is the sort of thing that I don't think we are going to be knowing anything about until the movie comes out, or the kind of question that won't be answered until we see the movie. So, that's what I'm hoping, anyways, because I don't want it to be like, I want to speculate about it, but I don't want to have that question answered, really. So,
yeah, as soon as that stuff starts coming out in the open, like, I'm just getting off social media and going off the grid as soon as the ship starts leaking.
It's hard though, man. I saw, as you did too, I know we talked about it briefly, but apparently there was some kind of real big spoilery photo or something leak going around like 4 or 5 days ago. Mm-hmm. And I know people were upset because like it popped up on their timelines and they weren't wanting to see that kind of thing. So I don't think I'm in deep enough as far as like the Star Wars dark web or the accounts that I follow. I don't think I'm in deep enough that it would pop up on mine, like the accounts that I see and follow or whatever. I think they would not do that.
But there are people I follow who are in that dark web
and seeing that stuff.
And seeing it. Yeah.
Right. Well, and it's like I almost just did it. Hopefully I didn't, spoil anything. Well, I don't even know if it's true, but you know what I mean? Hopefully I didn't like sort of say a spoiler there or whatever, but like, it's like, well, I read something so long ago, and it's one of those things, like the thing that I read is something that I've definitely heard other people just kind of casually talk about, because it's like one of the first like sort of spoilery things that came out about the movie, and it was talked about pretty openly by some of the sources that, leaked it or whatever. And so I've just heard people like bring it up like in passing conversation or whatever on podcasts and stuff, and it's like one of those things where it's like at a certain point, some of the things that people have been seeing leaked and spoiled are going to have been around long enough that they'll just like not even think of them as a spoiler anymore.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So there's a concern there as well. But all right. Well, hey, did you notice that Maz Kanata is in that Rebel briefing scene?
No, but then someone on the internet pointed it out.
Exactly. I was gonna say I sure didn't, but luckily somebody drew a circle around it and pointed that out. So props to whoever that was. I did not see the original source or whatever, or if I did, I don't know it, but that was cool. So yeah, we don't know what kind of role she's gonna have in the movie. I think it's gonna be small. I know the Lupita Nyong'o was asked about it recently and was like, "Well, I hope I'm in it. You know, that stuff can always get cut." So that's pretty telling as far as like how big of a role she has. But I don't need it to be big. I just want it to be cool, and I want her to be in it. So
yeah, definitely.
And she's there. So that'll be good. Also, that glacier-looking environment planet thing from the trailer. Remind me, Ryan, what did we come down? What side of it did we come down on when we talked about the trailer on Monday night?
I think I came down on like it was like an iceberg, a giant iceberg floating in the water. But as I've kind of seen and revisited it, it's definitely not that.
Well, yeah, I don't think it's that, but like, I'm like, oh, it's in space, right? It looks like it's in space, kind of. You see like stars in the background and stuff, and it
I mean,
definitely
everything is in space.
Okay.
Technically.
This reminds me of our conversation from last week when I was like, well, they didn't take it out because it was there from the beginning, you know, or whatever. But yeah, I don't know. Okay, fine. Everything's technically in space, but this looks like it might be floating in space, in the vacuum of space, you know. Or I don't know, though, because it still kind of looks like a reflection to me, but it's weird because it's not the exact reflection. Like, it's definitely not the exact reflection.
So I've heard it referred to as, like, an ice planet, and this is just, like, you know, a part that's, like, jutting up in the terrain.
Okay.
Because it's not, like, a water, like, reflection. It's
I
like
see.
a funhouse mirror type reflection, like something that would reflect off ice. I don't even remember which podcast I was listening to that said that, but yeah.
Man, I hope I'm not. I hope we don't rip off anything too blatantly, or like not blatantly because it wouldn't be intentional, but I hope we don't. Totally regurgitate some brilliant idea from another podcast without sourcing it. I don't think so. But, I have listened to a bunch of good ones this week. I've listened to Scavenger's Horde, which was great. I listened to Force Material, which was great. Steel Wars did a call-in show, which was pretty fun and really cool. They did that like right after the trailer came out, so that was good to listen to. Trying to think of what else I checked out, but...
Blast Points.
Oh, Blast Points, obviously.
Star Wars 7x7.
Cool.
I've listened to a ton this week.
I've listened to a ton. I still have more in my
I have so many more
list. Yeah.
And some people are on like their second one. And like I know Sky Talkers
on their second one.
Posted their second one. I'm like, oh my god, I can't keep up.
Yeah. Well, I think we did the whole like insufferably like lengthy analysis the first time around. You know what I mean? Where a lot of shows were like, hey, let's just do a quick pass and then come back to it. So we did like the super long version, and now we're doing a quick pass back over it in the end. So at least that's how I envisioned it. But another amazing thing. Oh, okay. Last thing on that glacier thing, though. That makes a ton of sense. I really like that idea that it's like an ice planet and that it's reflecting on the ice there, because it doesn't look like an exact match. But then on the other hand, like it seems like underneath, on the underside of that, there's like structures, like buildings and stuff almost, and you don't see anything like that on the top. So it's very odd. I don't know really what to think. And almost too, like they look pixelated. Like the bottom of it looks almost like Minecraft looking, like pixelated 8-bit buildings underneath there or something. So I'm sure like in motion and like closer up it'll be more clear like what on earth is going on there. But I don't know. I'm thinking that could be one of maybe more than one locations in the unknown regions in this movie. I feel like they might finally go into the unknown regions a little bit here. I've seen a lot of reference to that in, well, like we're going to talk about the Kylo Ren comic solicitation references Luke in Ben Solo traveling to the unknown regions somewhere there. So I wouldn't be surprised if we see a little bit of that in this movie. But
they're going to a lot of places.
Yeah,
in this
it seems
movie.
that way.
A lot of characters going to a lot of places.
Seems that way, and that's another reason where I'm like, did Rey really go to, that Star Destroyer on Jakku, or is this a way of getting more than one place without actually like visiting a lot of locations from Star Wars without necessarily having to actually visit them, if there's some kind of Force vision aspect to that. So we'll see. One of the coolest, I think, and just unbelievable moments Monday night, as far as the discourse and all that stuff goes, and just the reaction to the trailer, was Phil Shostak pointing out that Ralph McQuarrie had done an Emperor throne thumbnail sketch in, I think, 1981. I'll link to Phil's tweet where he is specific about it, but from 1981 or something like that for Return of the Jedi. And the sketch itself is just really cool and creepy looking, and then to see the throne from this trailer, there can be no doubt that is it. You know what I mean? They definitely. Obviously Phil Shostak is writing the Art of the Rise of Skywalker book, and no doubt that thumbnail is in there and being compared to this throne. So, if there was any source to trust on the issue, it's him. He's not like, I'm sure at this point, he's not like, oh, wow, that reminds me of something I looked at for Return of the Jedi. It's more like, oh, I wrote about this in my book, so I'll give you a sneak peek, so.
Yeah.
So that's really cool. But yeah, I love them going back to it, because they go back to McQuarrie stuff so often. But it's usually, I don't know, like a stormtrooper design or something that just feels more traditionally Ralph McQuarrie Star Wars design or whatever. And this isn't that. This is creepy and almost Gothic looking and ancient looking. And so it's a pretty different vibe than most of the Ralph McQuarrie stuff that they borrow from for Star Wars Rebels or, whatever else it may be.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, all right. The battle droid in Babu Frick's workshop.
There's that prequel connection.
Yeah, and that's why I even bother to point it out, because I think everybody's seen it at this point. So, whoever it was that found that, because again, I don't know who it was. I know that it definitely was not me.
Yeah.
But now once I watched it, when
now I can't not see it.
Yeah, it's not hard to see or anything, but I certainly didn't see it the first few times I watched the trailer at all until I saw that somebody else had pointed it out. But no, it's just cool. But I'm definitely hoping for a lot of little stuff like that, referencing the prequels and bringing everything together.
Yeah.
Okay, next one. I don't know. Okay, so this is we're 6 days after we recorded our initial trailer reaction. And when we recorded that one, I had no idea what to make of the scene of Rey and Kylo Ren destroying that pedestal with Darth Vader's mask on it, what I assume is Darth Vader's mask. 6 days later, I still have no idea what to make of that scene, which I'm fine with. It's just striking imagery. But my friend Jeremy earlier this week mentioned to me that he thought potentially that could be a fight scene between Rey and Kylo Ren, and just the way they, kind of are moving or whatever, they end up hitting that thing at the same time. Almost they're fighting each other, and as they're fighting each other, they destroy that pedestal.
Naughty children. Look what you did. You were horsing around, and you destroyed Darth Vader's helmet.
Well, you had mentioned the marbles on the ground in our last discussion.
There's Legos everywhere.
It's kind of funny because you think about it oh, okay, well, there's some stuff that's destroyed over in the corner that you see on the floor or whatever. And so it's did Rey and Kylo Ren look each other in the eyes, maybe kiss real quick and then say, let's mess this room up? And they're just running around with their lightsabers, breaking everything. Or would it make more sense that there's like stuff like that's destroyed all over the place in that room, including this pedestal that gets destroyed because as they're battling one another, stuff is getting taken out. I suppose the other option is that there's like other people in that room as well that they're battling. So there's some other kind of fight going on and they're on the same side of it, a la the throne room scene from The Last Jedi. But yeah, it's just kind of like one of those things where he said that and I was like, huh. Because I just thought, like, why would they show that scene in the trailer of them teamed up like that? Because it seems to give a lot away that I wouldn't think they'd want to give away. So I don't know. I mean, I wouldn't say that's my... I don't have a horse in the race, I suppose, or like I don't feel like I know what's going on. If I had to choose, I would say I think they're working together there, or it's still the body language and just the way it all shakes out. It does seem like they're working in tandem rather than battling each other. But I went back and watched it a million times, and I definitely think there's a possibility that Jeremy's onto something there, and that they are just having a more traditional fight scene. And because the imagery and the symbolism could even end up still being sort of like the same, regardless of if they're intentionally doing it together or not. You've got like a dark side user and a light side user, and they simultaneously, like through each of their actions, kind of like destroy this not relic from the past, but like this symbol of really like the first 6 movies, you know what I mean? And the mistakes that were made at that time or whatever. So if it's like we're watching that, image play out in the trailer and thinking like, oh, wow, well, this is like Rey and Kylo and they're working together. And as a result, they're going to like, right the wrongs of the past or whatever. Like, even if they're not intentionally working together yet, but their lightsabers strike that thing at the same time, like it's sort of the same takeaway. You know what I mean? So...
Yeah, I mean, I think it has different weight behind it, depending. I'm still not totally... I think more of where I'm at with it is I'm not sure if this is like... If this is like Force Vision stuff or...
like they're not even in the same room together?
Yeah. If this is like a premonition or a dream or something, because I think like just I don't know, because like the Kylo wearing the mask, we know, I mean, I guess we know he puts it back together and that, it's something, but this is the only shot we see him with the mask. So it's really... Like, it's really interesting to me that this is the one shot that, has the mask in it. And then it's aside from, like, the marbles they spilled, it's, like, it's such a sterile environment that, I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know what's happening here.
Yeah. Yeah, no. I'll tell you what. And when I freeze framed it like 600 times to try to see like, are they fighting each other? Or are they working together? As it fades like from that shot into the next shot, you can kind of see like it looks like Vader's meditation chamber or something, like the architecture in the background there, like as it's fading from one shot to the other. So it's sort of like, what is this room? Like this like Kylo. I mean, if it's the well, and you know what else is weird about it too is like we see him. Or we see that mask on the pedestal, not on the pedestal, but we see that mask like on a table or something, or he puts it in a drawer, right? Is that what it is? Or no, we don't see that in the other teaser, but we saw like leaked footage of that from, first like Resistance hero Scott from the Disney shareholders meeting. And then they showed it at D23 to people in the room, but not to us. And it's just like, well, that's not what this pedestal thing is. You know what I mean? So what's the deal there? Because it's like, well, does Kylo have some room where he keeps his like creepy artifacts, But like, it seems like we'd seen him put it in storage or whatever, and then not on a pedestal. You know what I mean? So I don't know. It's weird there. And then the other thing did we even talk about this last week, or like, did we even notice that? I don't think we did. That Rey had the dagger.
We mentioned that there was a dagger, but I don't think neither of us made the conclusion because obviously that's not the thing that is top of mind for us within our fandom, I would say.
Yeah. I'm still not making the conclusion, but
yeah. So yeah, it's the question of, is this the Mortis dagger?
Yeah.
Which
I didn't remember there was a Mortis dagger until people started talking about that. But I have seen the Mortis arc a couple of times, but it's not my favorite, so I didn't remember that so well. Where do you stand on that, Ryan?
Where I stand is I'm 20 minutes away from making a conclusion. There is a Star Wars Explained video that has been put up.
And it's 20 minutes long?
Well, it's a weekly Q&A.
Okay.
And one of the questions is, does Rey have the Mortis dagger? So, I'm going to leave it to Alex and Molly to let me know what's going on with that.
Yeah, I would certainly trust them as the source to answer that question more so than us. But I'll tell you what, can I make a guess as to what they're going to say?
Yeah.
I searched out images this morning of this Mortis dagger, and I looked at what it looks like, both in Rebels and in Clone Wars, and it doesn't look a whole heck of a lot like the dagger that Rey is holding.
Definitely not a 1-to-1. Yep.
Yeah, like it's pretty different because it's very. It almost looks like shaped like a Star Destroyer, like that, like kind of slender triangle type shape. The Mortis one, and this thing looks like jagged and like
chunky,
whatever. Yeah, and it has the. You have to forgive my lack of knowledge about. But on the hilt, it has like the crossguard type thing, Rey's does, the one she's holding there, and the Mortis dagger doesn't have anything like that either. So the Mortis thing looks more like sci-fi, honestly. It looks very like kind of, it's futuristic kind of, or maybe not futuristic, but smooth, clean. Kind of like the Sith, what do you call them? The holocrons and stuff like that. You know how that's got like sort of like a sci-fi kind of look to it. It's like smooth lines and, it looks like people that would like all their furniture would be made out of like glass and stuff. You know what I mean? That's like that's what that dagger looks like. And then the dagger she's holding looks more like it's out of like Lord of the Rings or something, So I'm not thinking that connection is really there personally, but. You and I sure had a conversation about it a couple days ago over text, though, huh? Remember that?
Yeah.
I was like, God, no, it's not the Mortis dagger. There's no way. Which I still think, but
yeah, that's pretty. That's on brand for you.
I know. Yeah, being an asshole. Yeah, I know. No, but my kind of like point that I made, which you did a pretty strong job of refuting, Ryan, just to let the listeners and kind of peek behind the curtain of our text messages, arguments or whatever. I was like, look, the shows draw inspiration from the movies. The movies don't draw inspirations from the show. And then you said, yeah, kind of like how Darth Maul was not in Solo, and how Saw Gerrera was totally not in the cartoon before he was in the movie, which was a pretty good touche moment on your part.
I think, and I think with stuff like this, I think Clone Wars is, that's one of those like straight from George's lips to our ears kind of things. So I don't know. Maybe it like some of the Clone Wars stuff like holds a little more value. I'm not sure.
Yeah, I think that makes sense, and that could be the case. I also think, though, that at the point George was making Clone Wars, like when he brought Darth Maul back and stuff like that, he was just kind of like, we're never making movies again anyway, so like might as well just go batshit like with this stuff. Like, let's just get as wild as we want to. It's a cartoon on Cartoon Network, so it is straight from George, but I also think that he did things clearly with the Clone Wars that he would not have probably done with the movies and stuff. And I think he felt freed knowing like, I'm just making a cartoon, and like not that many people are going to watch it in comparison to my films. And like I don't think he thought like that it would have an impact on future films necessarily when he was doing that stuff. So
maybe, but I don't think George really ever took into account like, oh, maybe this is too weird for a mass audience when he was making anything.
Maybe not. Maybe
Have
not.
you seen the prequels?
Yeah. No, that's true. That is true. But even like if we're just thinking about it from the perspective of JJ and whoever else now looking back at that stuff, even Dave Filoni, whoever, I'm sure Dave Filoni kind of looks at some of the stuff from, like World Between Worlds, for instance, which also comes up still as something that could pop up in some of these movies, and maybe it could. But, I would think even Dave Filoni, who I would say is like the creative source behind something like World Between Worlds, would sort of say, okay, like what medium am I working in now? And like, is this something that really works well in animation and doesn't necessarily work the same way? Like, I don't think we're going to see, if we ever do see the World Between Worlds in a movie, I don't think we'd see like a character standing on a light bridge in the middle of space with like portals all around them. And like, you know what I mean? Like, it kind of looks cool in a cartoon, but would it in a movie? Like, I feel like not so much, those could be famous last words. They very well might be, but we'll see, or we won't. But yeah. Anyway, I guess what I'm saying here is that it's an interesting idea, especially if you're a fan of the Mortis stuff, that could be the Mortis dagger. But based on the appearance of it, I don't think that would really be the case. And kind of the conclusion that we came to when we were talking about it too, because we were definitely on two different sides of that argument. I guess I could see it being like, because you had pointed out, like, well, it could just be something where like in the visual dictionary, that's what they refer to it as, but they never explain it in the movie, or it's never called that in the movie. And like, so if you're watching the movie and you haven't seen that cartoon and whatever, like it doesn't affect you because you don't need to know that that's what it is or whatever. And I could see them doing something like that for sure. But then I don't think it would probably be a significant part of the movie if that's the way they went with it, So anyway, I don't think it's a Mortis dagger. Do you?
I mean, I don't know. Is where I'm at. I'm saying, I'm leaving it up to Star Wars to explain it to me.
A lot of power they have, yeah.
But I think like it's again, because like I said before, I don't even know if this is like a vision or whatever. But it is a dagger. And, like, there's some significance to it. Like, when you have lightsabers, like, why do you need a dagger? And so there's something to it. So I think, like, unless it's like a desert planet type situation where they're like, well, we have all these desert planets, especially this one, but let's make some new desert planets. Like, it's like, well, we have this significant dagger, and we don't really use daggers in Star Wars, but this one's really significant. Let's make another one. Like, it's kind of weird.
Yeah. But, like, the look of that dagger, to me, it looks like Palpatine's throne, It looks ancient. It looks like kind of cut from the same cloth, and like the Mortis dagger just like absolutely does not fit that aesthetic or look like that. So
but it's hard because those cartoons are so stylized. Like,
I guess that's true. Elliot keeps asking me why there's no Darksaber toy. Like, he really wants a Darksaber toy.
Ooh.
Yeah,
like, same, dude.
Okay, but if they made a Darksaber, well, if they made a toy, they could make a toy. It just looked like a cartoon. But if that thing were to ever show up in a movie, it couldn't really look just like it does in the cartoon. I mean, I guess it could, but it would really feel out of place. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I guess that's kind of what you're saying, right? Like, they'd have to sort of like update the aesthetic or redesign it a little bit. But it could still be the same object, I suppose. So yeah.
I still want a Sabine figure with that comes with the Darksaber, because
that'd be cool.
I don't think any of them have. Maybe the Black Series one, actually, but I've never actually seen that in a store. So
no, it doesn't come with it. But and nor have I ever seen it in a story either. So yeah. All right. So last thing for me from the trailer here, clean up on the trailer.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think this is the case. I don't think this is like what it means, but there's I feel like for a while now people have been every once in a while sort of saying like, what if like in a crazy turn of events in this last movie of this 9-part saga, like for some reason the rebels and the Empire, or the First Order in this case, have to work together. You know what I mean? And I really don't like that myself, because like we've had clear good guys and bad guys in Star Wars like all this time, and for Hux and all these stormtroopers and everybody just be like all of a sudden like, you know what, like we're on the same team now. It's cool. We'll just set aside the fact that for 8.5 movies we've painted these guys as the absolute enemy, but now they just changed their mind and we're friends or whatever. And I don't think it would be
that was a little reductive, but
okay,
I think
true.
Compared to how people are envisioning this.
Well, yeah, of course. And I mean, I'm toying with the idea myself, but it just seems like it would be a kind of crazy like conclusion to this saga. But then I guess on the other hand, it's sort of like, well, this is supposed to be the conclusive end, and one way it could be a pretty conclusive end is if the rebels and the First Order weren't like at war anymore, not because one defeated the other, but because like they decided to stop. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And the other reason I was thinking about this, and I was like, well, okay, like maybe there is a way that this could work, is we all assume that line refers to Rey and Kylo. Your coming together will be your undoing. But some of the best Star Wars lines, most of the best Star Wars lines, don't have just one interpretation or one meaning. And so I was like, well, what if this is one of those really great Star Wars lines and it doesn't just mean one thing? And so it could mean Rey and Kylo, but at the same time, it could also mean like the First Order and the Resistance or something like that. And then you consider the fact that Finn used to be a stormtrooper and now he's not anymore, and we don't really know what's going to go on with his story in this movie, but is there a possibility that he could, convince a significant chunk of stormtroopers?
The Stormtrooper Rebellion.
Yeah. And
that's
we
been, talked about since the very beginning of this sequel trilogy.
Yeah, and we see those shots of like Finn and Janna and Rose, I think, and those characters like riding on the Orbaks on what seems like the bridge of a Star Destroyer, which doesn't necessarily mean anything, but it's kind of a head scratcher. And people who have a better eye for this stuff than I do have pointed out that you see both First Order and Imperial Star Destroyers in these trailers. So how does that work? Like, does the same side control both of those Star Destroyers, or is it something where like, well, maybe the First Order's not even on the same team as the Empire? If the Empire exists in this movie in some way. Although that made more sense to me when I thought that the Sith troopers maybe. Although that never made sense either. It's like, well, maybe the Sith troopers are not with the First Order. But it's like, well, how come they look exactly like the First Order then? You know what I mean? They have the same like design and everything. But we know now that they work for Kylo Ren, like their descriptions say like they answer only to Kylo Ren or something like that. So I don't know. Again, I don't really think we're going to see like Star Destroyers and TIE Fighters and X-Wings and, Blockade runners like all working together on the same side in this movie. But it's definitely an interesting thought, and I wouldn't put it out of the realm of possibility.
I think I think there's a conversation to have that I'm totally not prepared for right now. But I think if we look at the warring factions throughout the saga, so we had in the prequels we had the Republic and the Separatists. After, but obviously that was Palpatine, kind of pulling the strings, making that what was essentially like a like almost just like Brexit situation, which could be solved with like, votings and referendums and things like that, even though I know the referendum is no longer very popular. But, it could be solved, without total war. It, devolved into total war. And there was kind of a clean break to that at the end, because basically Palpatine had all of the separatist leaders go to Mustafar, and Darth Vader killed them all. Which, was basically the end of the separatist movement. And then I think, the Empire came down hard and took control of those systems, and then, the Empire reigned for that, for like the original trilogy time period. But then it gets really interesting once you get into the sequel trilogy time period and the new canon, where you have there's like a ceasefire, but there's still like these pockets of Empire holdouts who are still fighting for the cause of the Empire. So there's like this strong philosophy that people have and are willing to fight for, that the galaxy is better under a unified empire with an emperor. And there's people who are still fighting for that in these pockets. And in the meantime, the New Republic is there's debate around disarmament. And so a lot of these like Empire controlled systems are disarming, but then like some of them are against it. And so that was like Mon Mothma's big push during that time period. And I think it's explored like in the Aftermath books, in Bloodline. There's some interesting stuff there. And then we have like the post-Empire people who are like adapting to life post-Empire, and like we have, and I think Resistance kind of we see some of those people like Griff and Doza, and people who were part of the Empire, because the Empire was huge, and obviously like these people need to like reacclimate to society. And then the First Order comes around with a very, and that's been building in the outer regions, the unknown regions, and they come back with, and again, I feel like, and we were talking about this a week or two ago, that the politics of the galaxy politics have not totally been well communicated in the films. And there's been like bits and pieces in the ancillary material, but we're not really getting like a good pulse on, the galactic politics in the films. But the First Order comes out of the unknown regions. They have these like child soldiers, and they have a very like Empire-esque view. I would say that their political leanings are more on the fascist side of things. And we see that the First Order is like a bit more brutal than the Empire, and because they saw the Empire fall, so they're like, we're gonna do things differently. Like it's the Empire had like a velvet glove approach to their manipulation um and like their soft power, but like First Order is like, we're gonna straight up just like stick a drill through your planet, get all the metal we need for making guns, like, so that we could go use these guns on another planet. And so I guess like kind of what I'm wondering is like, are people in the galaxy being like, okay, good, this new First Order, this Tea Party that's coming in, like, oh, okay, they're going back to the kind of like politics that I subscribe to. Like, yeah, we don't need a new republic. Like, we need a supreme leader. Like, so are people like, you know, adapting to this and like, okay, yeah, I'll go fight with the First Order. Like, I don't want this like crazy like rebellion, like, you know, this uh Antifa stuff happening all over the board here. Like, I want like control. Like, we need stability. And then so like so what I'm getting to is like, when we come to the end of this, because obviously killing the emperor did not end the empire. And that's the case in the EU. That's the case in the new canon. Like, it was pretty apparent that just killing the emperor did not bring the end of the empire. So like, who knows if it's killing the supreme leader, which is Kylo Ren, which is a whole nother conversation. Is that going to bring the end of the First Order? Is killing Hux going to bring the end of the First Order? Is what will be the end? Or is this, because if they're saying, you know, JJ's not screwing around, this is the end of the saga, if it is the end, like, you can't have that like ellipsis there, like, well, the Supreme Leader was defeated, but there's still all these like First Order ships and soldiers out there.
Yeah. Well, two things, I think. Number one, kind of like what was maybe something really interesting you said right at the start there was kind of talking about like the Clone Wars and how like Palpatine had really orchestrated that whole thing, and you had two different sides that they really didn't know what they were fighting for, and they were being used against one another or whatever. And, you know, knowing that Palpatine's back and knowing that Palpatine is this great orchestrator or whatever, is there room for, you know, the First Order to realize it's been played or something? And would that be enough for it to kind of turn and like work with the resistance or the rebels or whatever, just because it's like, well, okay, like, wow, we see the truth now. I feel like that'd be hard to communicate in a movie like this, you know. Yeah. And it would be, even if they did, it's just like, would you then expect like once the war is over, once this final battle is over, that all those people are just gonna like get along or something, you know what I mean? So it kind of like still comes back to that same problem you're sort of talking about here, which is like, how do you actually resolve a galactic civil war or galactic, you know, war like this with two, you know, sides? And I mean, I think that the truth of it is, no matter what they do, there would always be the room to tell the story of like, how do things actually resolve long term, and like what goes on long term. And then the other thing I would say is that, like, you know, you're right that in the EU, you know, killing the Emperor and destroying the second Death Star didn't really end the struggle. And, you know, and even, you know, obviously now with the sequel trilogy, we see that it didn't really end the struggle. But I don't think too many people left the movie theater in 1983 thinking like, well, I'm not satisfied because I know that, you know, once they killed the Emperor, there's things were still going to happen afterwards or whatever. You know what I mean? Like, it still worked as the conclusion to that movie, even though how could they write the end of Return of the Jedi where there wouldn't be room to tell that story, is what I'm saying. And how could they write the end of The Rise of Skywalker where there wouldn't be room to be like, are we going to see every single First Order officer and trooper vaporized? Is every single ship going to cease to exist? Because if it doesn't, there's always the you could always tell a story about a pocket of survivors who are still raising hell somewhere. You know what I mean? Or how there's still little fires all over the galaxy that the rebels or the Resistance or the New Republic or whatever it is would have to go put out. So I don't know. You know, I hear what you're saying, but I also think, like, I don't know that there's a way to end the movie that doesn't leave that ellipsis there.
Yeah.
If they want to explore it. They don't ever have to write a book or make a comic or a cartoon or something that delves into that, but I don't know how they could write it in a way where that would preclude them from doing it down the road if they wanted to.
Yeah.
So, I don't know. But why don't we move on to discussing what's, like, potentially even more interesting than any of the stuff we just brought up from the trailer, which is this solicitation for Kylo Ren issue number 2, which will be coming out in January. And I guess doesn't necessarily follow a similar line of thought as we were just discussing, but it's not completely divorced from it either. Man, this made a splash on, what was it, Wednesday? Thursday?
I was
splash.
like not on Twitter all day, and like you sent this text, and I was like, wait, what? Like, yeah.
Yeah,
and then I
wild.
went on Twitter after I got off work, and it was just that was the convo.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, like, the first thing I saw was the cover art, and I was like, why is Mike from Stranger Things, like, you know, fighting the Knights of Ren with Luke Skywalker? I refuse to believe that Finn Wolfhard is not the reference material for this version of Kylo Ren here on the cover. That is not based on Adam Driver. That is Finn Wolfhard.
Okay.
And I'll watch the show. You know, if they do a young Kylo Ren starring Finn Wolfhard, I'll watch it. But
my God, yeah.
that's totally him, though. I mean, and I'm not sure who the reference is for Luke Skywalker, but I don't think it's Mark Hamill either. So. That's fine, but no, I mean, the cover's fine. It's actually really cool, but it features a Luke Skywalker and a young Ben Solo battling the Knights of Ren in the rain. So it's wild. It's totally wild, totally unexpected. And do you have you want to read the description, Ryan? Do you have that up? The description of what this comic features?
I don't have it up.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, I'll read.
Why don't you read it?
With I was trying to go for a seamless transition there.
Yeah.
But,
no.
The seams are visible.
There's the seams. It's Kintsugi. We're just gonna really draw attention to it.
Yeah. With the new Jedi school in ruins and fellow students hot on his trail for the murder of their master, Ben Solo flees to the only friend he has left in the galaxy, a man named Snoke. But Snoke has plans for Ben and ideas about the Force that are as dangerous as they are intriguing for the troubled young Jedi. If Ben wishes to be truly free, the answers might lie with the dark side and with the Knights of Ren. But it won't be the first time he's tangled with the Knights. In the past, Jedi Master Luke Skywalker journeys to the unknown regions and brings young Ben along for the mission. Can even Luke Skywalker stand against the fabled Knights of Ren? So that is the description for the comic, and it's kind of wild. I think the thing. Well, let's just look at the first line. I mean, with the new Jedi school in ruins and fellow students hot on his trail for the murder of their master, Ben Solo flees to the only friend he has left in the galaxy, a man named Snoke. Okay, so there's been a lot of discussion and interpretation of this sentence with the new Jedi school in ruins and fellow students hot on his trail for the murder of their master. Well, we know he didn't murder Luke Skywalker. So people are like, oh my God, it's not what it seems. You know what I mean? Or like, it's not the version of this story that we saw in the Rashomon flashback and in the Han Solo narration in The Force Awakens might not be what really happened. Which I think is very Star Wars for that to kind of like, you know, for us to learn more about the actual nature of what occurred and stuff as things go on. Yeah, what do you think about this, Ryan? What's your kind of feeling on this? This first part.
It's like multiple paradigm shifts happening for me here. Because for one, I had kind of assumed that the Knights of Ren were like the former students from the academy, and like Kylo Ren had like gone and converted them and was like, yeah, like Luke tried to kill me. This dude sucks. Let's go do our own thing. Like, and that's obviously wrong on multiple accounts. Because we're seeing that they thought he killed Luke, and they didn't join with him. They didn't agree with him. The students came after him.
Yeah, but like Luke says in The Last Jedi that Kylo Ren fled with a group of his students. So now are we to interpret that as like, well, he didn't flee with a group of his students. He fled, and a group of the students chased after him. Mm-hmm. I mean, that could be the case for sure.
From a certain point of view.
From a certain point of view, but it also could be the case that, like, he did have some conspirators, mm-hmm. and they were killed or something. Well, I guess not. That doesn't really make sense. I guess, like, based on this, anyways, it seems like, yeah, the survivors, though Luke thought they went with Ben, they probably didn't go with Ben. But then, like, so what's the deal here? Like, with the Junior Jedi School in ruins and fellow students hot on a trail for the murder of their master, Ben Solo flees to the only friend he has left in the galaxy. Okay, so Luke Skywalker is not dead, but we know that Kylo Ren does bring that house down on him, or whatever, that structure down on him. Whether he obviously didn't kill him, but whether he intended to kill him or not, I don't think we can look at this description and go like, oh, well, Ben didn't even mean to attack Luke or anything. Like, I mean, we still know that, like, Luke was sensing the dark side in him, threatened him, non-verbally or whatever, but threatened him, and that Ben responded. So when Ben responds, like, I guess now people are questioning, is he the one who actually attacked the temple, or could it have been the Knights of Ren who showed up and attacked the temple? But it's weird that this would all, like, I don't see how this could work out where Ben is still not at the heart of what happened to the temple. Because it's like, how does this work? On the night that Luke Skywalker walks into his bunk and is like, oh, shit, like, this dude has some truly evil thoughts in his mind. I'm going to turn my lightsaber on, but not use it against him. But think about it for a second. Like, on the very night that happens, and
in the meantime,
and Ben pulls the structure down on him. All of a sudden, the Knights of Ren just coincidentally show up and light everything on fire, and then everybody's like, "Whoa, Ben did that!" And Ben's like, "No, I didn't. I'm still like I don't want to do bad things." And then he runs to Snoke. I mean, there's too much about this where it's like he goes to Snoke. Why? Because he's been communicating with Snoke in a very Anakin and Palpatine kind of way, I assume, where it's like Anakin, in the moment that he throws Mace Windu out that window, it's like, yeah, he hadn't necessarily been like premeditating on doing that exact move, but we also at the same time don't go, oh, well, Anakin didn't even mean to kill Mace Windu. I mean, he didn't mean to kill Mace Windu, but at the same time, like, once he did it, boom, he did it. You know what I mean? And so I feel like I guess what I'm looking at here is like, this is still kind of the same thing that I thought happened, but with more interesting layers added onto the top of it, But I've seen some discussion where it's like, oh no, like, this is like what happened is completely different than what we thought. And I mean, like you said, a paradigm shift. I mean, certainly from certain angles of it or certain parts of it are wildly different probably than we thought. But I think other things, it's just like making it even more kind of rich or whatever, by adding layers to it, which I think is what it is. 'Cause it's still, to me, a heel turn for Ben Solo in this moment, But I think some people are looking at, especially the line, Ben Solo flees from the fellow students, like almost like, well, he's a victim here, and he didn't mean to do what he did, or, he didn't even do what he did. And, it's all a case of mistaken identity or something. And I don't feel like that can really be the story. But they very well may be trying to make it that much more sympathetic for him, especially if the ultimate result of the Rise of Skywalker is that he turns back to the light. If we can understand a little more why he did what he did or whatever, then that's going to make that more easy to digest, I guess.
Yeah, I think, and that makes sense to me, because I think we needed to understand Kylo Ren as a villain. Like, we needed to establish him as a villain in the films and the ancillary material, but like now we're kind of at the point, and it started with The Last Jedi, of like understanding how he, like, the villain's journey essentially. And yeah, I think inevitably there's going to be pieces that we're going to get where, I mean, he's the most compelling villain in Star Wars history. And we're going to keep getting pieces, because it's still like, how is the son of Han and Leia an antagonist? How is he so evil? How did he kill his father, Han Solo? And like, yeah, I think we're going to get more pieces, and I think like a better understanding, and it's gonna be weird and hard, and it's going to challenge like perceptions we have. And I think like and like, I mean, you really have to, like, at this point, like, you have to be like on board and open-minded for like what's going to be coming in the next basically 3 months, because this comic series is going to continue a little bit past the release of The Rise of Skywalker. And I think that's kind of like a new sort of challenge within Star Wars.
Yeah, I mean, really, you say it's gonna continue beyond the Rise of Skywalker, but really, it's gonna just barely start before the Rise of Skywalker comes out. So It really is kind of a post Rise of Skywalker comic overall. And that's another thing too, that I've seen some commentary that like, oh well, if there was any doubt if we're gonna see kind of, when and how Kylo turned in the Rise of Skywalker, this puts that to bed. But to me, I think it's almost the opposite, which is what I think we kind of talked about this earlier in the week via text message and stuff. But to me, reading this description, it's pretty concrete proof that we're not going to see this take place in the movie, because if we were, I don't think it would be something that would be in a comic right after the movie came out, but like even more so, it's not something that would be released in a description like this. Like, you can write a solicitation for a comic without giving all this away, and, and they gave it all away. And like, so if this is like some, important scene or reveal from the Rise of Skywalker, like, we're not seeing it in a solicitation for a comic in October. Like, they're definitely better at keeping things under wrap than that. And so I think that the way I look at it is more like, does this kind of hint at what they want to do with the character in the Rise of Skywalker? And I think it probably does, but I don't think we're going to see this in the movie, because if we were, they wouldn't be describing it, So this is going to support what we see in the movie. But I think that there's not going to be room in the Rise of Skywalker to tell this story, or else it would be in the movie and not in this comic. So
I don't know if we'll see too many more like flashbacks to that night. I think like, the film portion of that was in The Last Jedi, and that's where that ends.
But this whole Knights of Ren thing is really interesting, because like, he battled the Knights of Ren when he was still Luke's pupil, and it says, well, okay, he runs to Snoke, and Snoke has plans for him, and Snoke has ideas about the Force that are as dangerous as they are intriguing for the troubled young Jedi. So, I mean, that kind of tells me too that Luke was correct when he was like, hey, this dude is really kind of like, he's got some super dark thoughts and he's wanting to go to the dark side, or Snoke has already turned his heart, One of the great things about The Last Jedi is that stuff is left ambiguous to a certain extent, because like Rey's like, no, you were wrong, Snoke hadn't already turned his heart,
So good.
Luke said he had. Rey said he hadn't. Who would know more? I mean, Luke was there, but then Luke's only seeing kind of what he wants to see, you could argue, whereas Rey is like more hopeful and whatever. So, I feel like one of the great thing about The Last Jedi is there is no definitive answer to that question, and there's no definitive source on that either. Even if Kylo Ren were to respond to that question in The Last Jedi, which he doesn't, I don't think you could even take him as a definitive source, because he's clearly evil as hell by that point. So, he doesn't necessarily need to tell the truth or be honest with himself or anybody else in the movie about, what happened then. So.
Yeah. And I mean, Star Wars are ancient, like, folklore told by unreliable narrators.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, that goes all the way back to Obi-Wan's, well, it was true from a certain point of view.
Yeah.
Like, and that's, I think that's something always to consider, when, getting to the quote unquote truth of like any Star Wars story.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think like, too, just on the topic of the Knights of Ren, like I'm sure, I'm confident that like JJ and Lawrence Kaz in the story group and whoever else, like they had a rough idea of like who the Knights of Ren were, how Kylo Ren was connected to them, why he took the name Kylo Ren when he turned to the dark side, and what connection there was to the Knights of Ren or whatever. So I don't know, like, do they work for Snoke? Do they work for Palpatine? Like, what is the connection there? Because it's interesting that like it's the unknown regions that Luke and Ben would have to go to have this confrontation with the Knights of Ren earlier, Like, why are they out there? I guess that's where Snoke is from, and it's also where we assume Palpatine. Well, maybe not. Maybe it's more of a Snoke thing. It's probably more of a Snoke thing than a Palpatine thing, because we know Snoke is from the unknown regions. So, but yeah, really, I have no idea like who they are, what their purpose is, or whatever. We just know that they're definitely dark side dudes, and it seems not the students from the Jedi Temple like many of us had expected. Although Slimo on Twitter did point out a 2015 interview with Adam Driver this week, where he said even then he's like, no, they're a group that existed, and I can't say, he's like, oh, this is hard, I can't say much more about it, but they're a group that already existed and that he joins up with or something. So yeah, like this kind of stuff, like we haven't known this story, we still don't know this story, but I do think that, because there's always a lot of discussion too, a lot is made of the fact that like Adam Driver has said, no, we've had an idea, from the first meeting with JJ, we knew where this guy's story would end, basically, or like we knew where this was going.
Yeah, and that's what got him to take the role, because he saw the arc.
Yes.
Of it.
Well, yes, yeah, right.
I mean, that's what he said.
Story.
Yeah.
No, I know, but it's just like when I hear you say the arc of it, like it's like sort of. I'm hearing that almost as like it's like gonna be a nice little story with a wrapped up bow on it kind of thing or whatever, and I think it's a guy like him, like he probably the more complex that arc is, the more interested he would be in it.
Exactly.
So.
That's why he would take it. Yeah. Because it's not a neat little bow.
Right.
And because it goes a lot of places before it reaches a conclusion.
Yes. Yeah. Sure. Okay. All right, cool. Well, it's going to be super interesting. It's going to be pretty compelling. I still think, as I think you do too, Ryan, but I still think it's going to be very much like we see the rise of Skywalker, we see the conclusion of Ben/Kylo Ren's story, whatever that may be. The character becomes even more interesting and complex than he had been already. And then it's like, cool, let's go back and look at, sort of more of how he got to where he was. I don't think this is like the story that's being told in the movie. I think this is something that's going to support and kind of add a little bit to whatever that story is in the movie. So
Yeah, and I think what this kind of tells me is that um, the Knights of Ren could only be seen in, like, I mean, they could do more flashbacks in this film, and they might only be in the flashbacks, or they could be a reckoning for Kylo. They could be coming back to fight against him or alongside him.
Yeah, for sure. Definitely that second part. I'm hesitant to believe they could be in flashbacks only, though, because, like, man, there's so much more kind of out front and center in, like, the marketing, like, as far as being in toys and, you know, the posters and stuff like that. But then also in the Vanity Fair article, you know, we see a photo of them, like, on Pasana, you know, and all that kind of stuff. And it just really seems like
that's true. Yeah,
they're gonna be involved in the story. I don't think necessarily tons and tons of screen time, but if they were just going to be a flashback like they had been in the previous two movies, I think, or really not even in the in the Force Awakens, I don't think we'd be seeing quite so much of them, but it's possible, I suppose.
So that brings me to one final point, one final question, wondering, okay, so I had always thought the Knights of Ren took their name from Kylo Ren. He established himself, I'm Kylo Ren, and then these people are like, yeah, we're with you, Kylo, and that was his gang, and they're like, we're all Rens too. Not the case. The Knights of Ren were something that existed before. Kylo joined them, Ben joined them, and then he adapted the moniker of Ren. So, first of all, what is a Ren?
Yeah.
And secondly, what is a Kylo?
Yeah. Yeah, no idea. No idea. I would guess a Kylo Ren is a cool sounding name that they came up with first, and then, like, once they were like, okay, our villain's gonna be called Kylo Ren or Kylo Ren. If you've watched the Force Awakens behind the scenes documentary, remember Michael Kaplan, the costume designer, like, keeps calling him Kylo Ren, which is pretty good. And I think Luke Skywalker, I think Mark Hamill didn't quite know how to pronounce it at the table reading as well. He was a little confused about that, if I'm remembering correctly. But anyway, I think it's a name they came up with first, obviously, and then they were like, well, if he's got a group of dudes, let's call him the Knights of Ren, you know, and let's refer to him as the master of the Knights of Ren. In other words, I don't know if it's like a thing where the meaning was probably ascribed to it after the fact versus, like, the name was developed because of what it meant or whatever, you know. But I guess that doesn't really matter in the long term. The point is, like, what is it going to mean? Like, how are they going to, you know, do something with it? I don't know that they would, though. I mean, I guess is my point. Like, isn't it enough if it's just like, well, there's Knights of Ren, and so Kylo called himself that. Like, he had to come up with a bad guy name when he became a bad guy, so, you know, if he's the master of the Knights of Ren, might as well have a Ren in his name or something. You know what I mean? I don't know.
I don't know either.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, Kylo, I bet Kylo's not going to mean anything. I bet Kylo's just like
But,
Kylo.
like, we didn't think, you know, we spent X amount of years thinking, like, you know, Darth didn't mean anything. And, you know, and
Well,
Moff,
it really doesn't, though. It's just it means Mister, if you're really evil. You know what I mean? Doesn't it? I mean,
no, it's a Sith thing.
Well, yeah, it's a Sith version of Mister. If you're a Sith, instead of being called Mr. Vader, you're called Darth Vader.
Yeah, but we didn't know that.
We didn't know there was a lineage or a significance.
Yeah, like in A New Hope. And, like, same thing with, like, Moff and Grand Moff and like, you know, regional governors. Like, we didn't know that stuff. And, like,
well, I think we knew what regional governor meant because it's pretty self-evident.
Well,
you know
that's
what I
true.
mean?
Yeah, there's a parallel. But we didn't know that that a Moff was, you know,
that's true.
What it was. So
Did George know what it was when he named it, though, is my question. And you know, did George know what a Darth was when he called him Darth Vader? I don't think so.
Absolutely, he did.
I don't think he did, and I think that's what I'm saying. They
did.
come up with this stuff after the fact. You know what I mean? So then it's like, how important is it when? Like, I bet they might come up with some comics or books to tell about like previous masters of the Knights of Ren. You know?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the previous Kylos.
Maybe, yeah. Maybe. But yeah, no, I mean, like, the whole thing is going to be so interesting to see, like, who these Knights of Ren are and how it all shakes out. But I'm telling you, it's going to be, I really think it's going to be a thing where a lot of people are going to walk out of this movie being like, well, we still didn't learn anything about the Knights of Ren. And then that's, like, where this comic's going to come in. But they'll see them fight and stuff, so that'll be enough for a lot of people who are complaining about, you know, that kind of thing. But I don't think the movie's going to have time to get into the history of it too much.
Dude, I don't know what this movie has time for.
Or what it's going to do. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's starting to... It's with all these like extra layers and like extra locales and extra characters that keep getting revealed, it's starting to like get a little worrisome, like especially when we start thinking of like, I mean, how much screen time different things are going to get. Like, there's just a lot in this movie.
Yeah, no, it's definitely the case, but it's like one of those things where a lot of Star Wars movies and stuff, especially, I guess, specifically in the Disney era, you see like character reveals and toy reveals and stuff, and you're like, how are they going to fit all this stuff in there? Like, you know, there were so many characters in Rogue One or Solo and Last Jedi where it's like, oh man, how are they going to fit all these characters in? And then you watch the movie and you're like, oh well, I guess the way they fit them in is a lot of them aren't very important and they're just kind of, you know, in the background or whatever.
Yeah.
Which I think is fine, but you know, like as far as like new like actual characters go, you know, we've got basically like Janna and Zori Bliss, you know, and Zori Bliss I don't feel like is necessarily going to be like I don't think she has to have like a lot of story or, you know, I don't think she's gonna be a super like three-dimensional character in the movie or anything, you know. Yeah, I don't know, there's gonna be a lot of cool stuff, like there's Sith troopers and there's Knights of Ren and, you know, all this stuff, but it's like it doesn't, I mean, it can be decoration in a lot of ways, you know what I mean, characters like that, I feel like. So
yeah because like we don't want to lose sight of the core story of the sequel trilogy, which I would say is the connection between Rey and Ben, and
yeah.
Well,
no, I mean Finn too. I feel like, you know, like a lot of us, like Finn really, I don't know, man. Like I watched The Force Awakens and like I love Finn so much. He's so great.
Finn too. Yeah,
and I think this movie really needs to be. We're going to get more Poe. I think like Poe is great and I love Poe, but like it's one of those things where you watch the first movie and Poe's not that significant, but then like Rian Johnson really did a great job with Poe in The Last Jedi. And so I think we'll get Poe's a significant member of the core group, you know what I mean?
Yeah. But I think he had his character arc in The Last Jedi. Like that movie, he learned to be a leader and what it takes to be a leader.
Yeah, and you can make the same argument for Finn, too, I suppose, where it's like, you know, Finn kind of learned how to choose for himself, like what he wanted his destiny to be and what he cared about, and he learned to care about something. And,
yeah,
you know, so
and to
was, like,
choose a side.
Yeah, so, like, that was his arc or whatever, too. And, I mean, obviously, like, Rey and Kylo, like, they still have a lot of unanswered questions around them, and, like, the primary story will be theirs. But if you think back to, like, Return of the Jedi or whatever, you know, Luke's story was primary, but Han and Leia's story was important too. It didn't get the same amount of screen time, you know, whatever, but like, and it didn't require the same amount of screen time. But man, I really want, you know, Finn's story to be significant. I think it will be, but I want him to be a significant part of this because just watching The Force Awakens, it was like in that movie, the big three, it was Rey and Finn and Kylo Ren, you know, and Finn was so significant in that movie and so charming and so charismatic and just like such a character that like people loved immediately, that I loved immediately. And like the idea that in the Rise of Skywalker, the focus is going to be so much on Rey and Kylo Ren and their dynamic, because like they're like the Finn and Rey dynamic is so incredible in The Force Awakens.
Well,
And then you don't get it in The Last Jedi because they're in different places, which is fine. But like, I want that dynamic back in The Rise of Skywalker, you know?
I mean, especially if you start thinking about there being like a very, very strange love triangle.
Well, is it even a triangle when you throw Rose into the mix too, right? You know what I mean?
And if you throw Poe into it, it's a love pentagon, or a pentagram. I don't know, but I mean, like we'll kind of see where that goes. But I think, it's a lot, and then also just ending the Skywalker saga. Like there's that weight as well, and Palpatine. Like, yeah. I mean, it's so much.
Yeah.
Like,
no, yeah, yeah. I don't know, and they keep describing it as like a fun adventure movie where Finn and Poe and Rey are off on an adventure together, and it's like a quest to get to something before the other side gets to it and all that.
Yeah,
it's like,
I think that's gonna be the first 45 minutes of that movie, and then the rest of the movie is not going to be like a Buck Rogers serial.
Yeah.
Like,
well, yeah, could be. Like, we don't know anything about this. I mean, I feel like with The Force Awakens, maybe not, but I feel like with The Force Awakens, at least, by this point, I was like, okay, I know where they are in the first third of the movie, and I know where they're going to be in the second third of the movie. I kind of like could sequence events together. Like, oh, this seems like it's early, and then maybe it's just because it was the nature of it, because they're introducing characters and stuff. You could kind of tell like where they were going to be introduced and then where they were going to go and that kind of stuff. But like, man, this movie, I have no idea, none. Yeah. I mean, I assume the Palpatine stuff with like the throne and the lightning bolts and all that is towards the end of the movie. But other than that, like, I couldn't really tell you. Well, that's not true. I guess I feel like that jungle stuff is definitely in the beginning. So, but as far as like a sequence of events goes and stuff, it's still very unclear, which is great. But
yeah, and so I think just kind of with all that said, like going back to your point of like, if a story can be told in a comic book or in a novel, it probably will be.
Yeah, because they don't have room for it in the... Yeah. Right.
Even though, like, and I don't think they're going to... I don't think they're going to retread ground that was already covered in The Last Jedi. So, like, I don't think we're going to see, like... I know some people were like, oh, we're going to get, like, the final version, the true version of what happened at the Jedi training, at Luke's Jedi training commune. And I don't think so.
No, I don't either. And I think like there's so much unnecessary or annoying conversation about how like JJ's going to come in and undo stuff that Ryan did in The Last Jedi, which he's definitely not. But that seems like it almost would be one of those things where it's like, oh well, The Last Jedi presented the fact that like there's always more than one side to a story, and there's no objective truth to what happened there, and it depends on what perspective you were participating in that from, like what went on, because I think The Last Jedi says like, if you're Kylo Ren or if you're Ben Solo or whatever, like you were scared and you thought you were about to get killed. And it posits that if you were Luke Skywalker, you were scared, and you were so scared you almost did a thing that you really, really didn't want to do, and like there is no objective truth to that scenario. Both of those things are true, I mean, it's just... I guess the first way Luke told it left out a lot, and so that wasn't very true. But I think the final two versions of that story we hear are both true. And so to come in this movie and be like, okay, well, now we're going to give you the real version of what happened, it kind of like, it flies in the face of like what is a more interesting story that was already told in The Last Jedi, which is, hey, depends on what side of that situation you were on, what really happened. You know what I mean? So, yeah.
Yeah, and I think going into this movie, like I think about at my work, we do a lot of work around like equity and inclusion, and part of that is looking at systems that exist in our society and, problems in our society. And a big part of, these conversations and this training that we do around this stuff is to expect and accept non-closure. And I'm really thinking about that a lot. And I think if you, yes, JJ's we're not screwing around. We're going to have a satisfying conclusion. People are saying, actors are saying, it'll be satisfying. It will be a conclusion. A conclusion doesn't necessarily mean that every single detail is explained and presented as absolute truth. And I think you can go back to the prequels. You can go back to the original trilogy. There's still ambiguity in those movies. I just watched Return of the Jedi again the other day. There's still things in that movie that we don't totally know the absolute truth to. And I think that's wonderful about Star Wars. And I think that's okay to have and to kind of keep in mind as as we go forward. And you can have your headcanon and stuff, but these are stories from a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away, told by unreliable narrators. So
Yep, for sure, 100%. And I think the people making these movies now, they, like the rest of us, spent years and countless conversations with friends well, what was Han's run-in with that bounty hunter on Ordy Mandrell or whatever? I think that's a pod racer, but whatever planet, whatever it says,
or the incident on Ord Mantell.
Yeah. The idea that because now I feel like people would be like, oh well, it's a plot hole. You didn't know what happened. You know what I mean? Yeah, thank you. That's why the movie has some level of mystery and excitement to it. You know what I mean? And I don't want every single little detail to have an explanation, and it takes a lot of the fun out of it. And it's one thing if they do a comic about it or they have an explanation in a visual dictionary or whatever. But for movie-going audiences and for the movie as a text on its own, divorced from all that other stuff, because I still think as much as there's a canon and a story group and everything else, the movies, one way to view them anyways is as a story independent of all that other stuff, in fact, that's the primary way to view them. That's how most people will view them, and so to have a little mystery in there is good. We want that. I still don't completely understand what happened with God, what's his name? The guy who ordered the clone army, Sifo Dyas.
Yeah.
And I know there's some Clone Wars story or something that really explains it or whatever, but it didn't make any sense.
It doesn't really explain it. Yeah.
Yeah, but no, that's people would point to that and be like, that's a problem with Attack of the Clones. To me, it's that's intriguing. I really don't know exactly how it happened. I feel like Sidious was behind it in one way or another, obviously, but I don't know all the details of what went down. That's okay. I like that. You know what I mean?
But it's also okay to leave that space for other people to tell that story.
Sure. Yes.
And then then it's oh well, I didn't need to know that. Well, okay, but it's still if it's a good story, it's a good story.
Yes, yeah. But when this movie comes out on December 20th, JJ has made his movie. He has said what he wanted to say, and he has told the story he wanted to tell. And then if 5 years from now somebody comes in and fills in some blank or whatever, that's a lot different than, people being well, they didn't explain in The Last Jedi where Snoke comes from, so therefore the movie sucks. They'll probably do a book in 5 years or whatever that explains where Snoke came from. It doesn't change the fact that the experience of watching that movie, there's mystery to it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That's what I'm saying, and that's what I like. And so, yeah, I'm not railing against filling in those blanks necessarily in other mediums and stuff, but as the films exist themselves, they need to have mystery in them. They need to have things that don't have every dot connected for you. Yeah. And they do. So, okay, let's quickly talk about some toys that we had revealed this weekend. Some new Black Series figures and some new Vintage Collection figures, Ryan.
Yeah, so we're getting some some Attack of the Clones love here, which is always welcome in this house. Yeah, we're getting a mullet Obi-Wan from Attack of the Clones. Looks good. Great.
Yeah,
looks great. Really, I love it. And we're getting a Cal Kestis, Anakin Skywalker from Attack of the Clones as well. So like mega dorky.
Yeah.
Attack of the Clones Anakin.
Yep.
With his bad like Zach Morris hair. Actually, it's worse than Zach Morris hair.
It's worse than the coolest haircut that like anyone's ever had.
That's true.
That's a meaningless statement, but all right. The only thing that tells me is it's not the absolute coolest haircut that anyone's ever had. But other than that, it doesn't mean. I mean, it could be so many things. Yeah.
Yeah.
I love Preppy's hair, but anyway, all right.
Yeah. But he's these look fantastic. They look just like their characters in Attack of the Clones. And
can I say them. For the record, as somebody who can't grow hair too, I would love to have either Obi-Wan's mullet or Hayden Christensen's weird preppy haircut. Like I would take either in a heartbeat. But no, they both look great, right? They both look fantastic.
Yeah. And then we have a Cara Dune vintage collection,
because we've already seen, not in stores, but we've seen on a live stream a Cara Dune Black Series figure, which is on the way presumably sometime this year. But yeah, there's a vintage collection.
It'll be either in a Walmart in Oklahoma today or in a Ross in a year and a half.
Yeah, okay.
Those are the only two places these figures can exist.
Yeah. No, but we've got like the vintage collection, AT-ST or whatever that is from The Mandalorian, and then like basically only Black Series Mandalorian toys, right? Like what? There's a, are there any? There's no vintage collection Black Series figures out yet, right? There may be some announced in the second wave of this year's vintage collection, or this like fall's vintage collection, whatever wave that would actually be called, but wave 7 or something. But yeah, basically like they put out 2 Mandalorian Black Series figures and then a vintage collection ship, and it was like, okay, this is weird.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's good to see that we have a vintage collection Cara Dune on the way, which also looks really good. I mean, here's the thing, like I was looking at this link from the Yakface forums that you included in our show notes, and like even the people at Yakface sometimes look at these pictures and they're like, wait, am I looking at a Black Series figure or is this vintage collection? Like it's like the sculpts are really, it's not that they're the same necessarily, but like, they can look very similar and it can be hard to tell. So,
especially when you're just seeing a picture and you're not actually seeing the figure because you don't know scale, because obviously like the Black Series figures are 6-inch. They have less articulation. The vintage collection figures are 3 3/4 inch, and they have more articulation.
Yeah. But so then they also revealed a 6-inch Knight of Ren, which is a different Knight of Ren than the vintage collection Knight of Ren that we currently have.
This is the hockey player.
The hockey player.
It's not the rugby player.
Okay. Right. So so it's a different Knight of Ren. Which looks cool, but you would expect it would, considering it's a masked figure,
Yeah, and it's just black leather.
Right. So
everywhere.
They were able to accomplish that, so that's good.
Yeah, it's
also a 6-inch Zori Bliss, which looks great.
Looks
as well.
so
Again,
good. Yeah.
As long as the paint apps and stuff are good, you would think this one would be as a helmeted figure, not too tough. So she looks
And what's
good.
exciting about the 6-inch Black Series Zori Bliss is there's more room for detail on her guns. I love the vintage collection Zori Bliss figure, but like her guns are tiny and there's not much room for like a ton of sculpting on them because they're tiny. And in this one, like we can really see like the crazy I don't even know if it's like engravings or exposed wires or whatever, but she has like these revolver-esque pistols, but they're like space revolvers, and they're so cool.
Yeah.
Like I love her guns, and I don't know.
Yeah,
She's awesome.
Yeah, they definitely look good. And then the one that maybe is it's funny, I'm not a Boba Fett guy, but the one that's maybe most exciting to me too is this vintage collection Mandalorian figure as well. And I did get the Black Series Mandalorian, and I think you did as well.
Yep.
You got the carbonized one, didn't you?
Yeah, I ended up selling it
Oh,
because
okay.
I didn't like it.
Didn't like the
because
carbonized thing.
I like the regular one better.
Gotcha.
So.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Cool. So, but yeah, I'm more into the vintage collection line at least right now than I am the Black Series. So I'm excited that that this is on the way. And I myself picked up a Poe Dameron vintage collection the other day from this recent wave. So
yeah,
I still need to get
best 3 3/4 Poe Dameron face sculpt.
Oh yeah,
I
would say best face sculpt period for Poe Dameron, because there's never been a good looking Black Series.
That's true.
I would say so. Yeah,
that's
I
fair.
mean, they all look weird. So
they all do look weird. Yeah.
Yeah. So no, this one looks good, and then so I just need to get the Sith Trooper, the Sith Jet Trooper, and the Luke, and then I'll be complete on this little line. So I know a lot of us, we're complaining about the lack of new product and new figures and stuff on Triple Force Friday, but which I think is valid and whatever, but at the same time, like, it's kind of nice that in the last almost, and it hasn't even been a month yet, but in the last 3-4 weeks or whatever, I've been able to kind of just like week by week kind of fill out that wave, and if another wave comes like mid-November or something, I will probably have this one complete, and then I can start kind of picking away at those ones too. So
yeah, they've been doing we have complained about this, rightfully so, a lot on this show, but Hasbro's been doing a great job keeping the shelves stocked.
Yeah.
They've been restocking at my local Target. My local Walmart is a hot mess, but that's just the natural state of Walmarts, I think. But like my Target has there's every time I go in there, they have some figures in this new line.
Yeah.
Up. And there doesn't seem to be any real. The only figure I see that seems to be weirdly the only real peg warmer is the vintage collection Luke.
Yeah.
That's the one I see the most.
Well, I wonder how they packed him. But yeah, he is the one that is the easiest to find, I think, because he's not from the new movie. You know what I mean? And so, but I'm sure he was probably packed heavier than. Well, I'm not sure, but I think he was probably packed heavier than, say, like the Knight of Ren, which is insane because what's everybody gonna want? You know what I mean? Like, I knew for sure the hardest Black Series figure to find would be the Mandalorian. He is. And I knew that the Knight of Ren would be the hardest to find vintage collection, and he is. And it's just like, why wouldn't you? I just don't. I don't know.
Yeah, I also see on the Black Series side, our idiot son Cal Kestis is hanging out.
He's sticking around. Yeah,
he's hanging out. And maybe that may change once the game comes out and people are like, okay,
yeah,
I know this.
One thing that I was happy to see, I didn't want to spend the $13 or $26 on Wednesday when I was there, or Thursday, but my comic book shop had one or two each of the wave of the vintage collection figures when I was there on Wednesday or Thursday. So
nice
for $12.99. So not sure what the story is on that. Probably whoever they get their product from or whatever kind of just sent them out, I guess. I don't know.
That's good.
But yeah, so that might be an option for me too, because I don't think I see the Sith Jet Trooper at my Target or anything. Although, real quick, my Target though, because we kind of complained about that on the Triple Force Friday, the first post Triple Force Friday episode. My Target's got a really pretty solid display in the middle of the store, in that showcase area in the middle of the store of Star Wars stuff. It's a lot more than. I don't think they really had it up necessarily Triple Force Friday right away. There's a lot of stuff there. They have a big, lots of toys out there. I mean, the Galaxy of Adventures ones are the ones that are most present, but they've got Lego, they've got Vintage Collection and Black Series, lots of
the
T-shirts.
Blu-rays.
Yep, the Blu-rays, posters. There's even like a wooden, like Millennium Falcon shelf, like a wooden shelf that you can mount on the wall.
Oh, weird.
Yeah, so there's a lot of stuff out there.
Nice. Also, right now, I just saw today, Star Wars figures are $1 or $2 off at Target.
Really?
Yeah, just throwing that out there. I saw Yakface tweet it. So, vintage collections are $11.99. Black Series are $17.99.
Ooh,
yeah,
nice.
So,
I got bit by that's $2 off, huh, for Black Series?
Yeah.
I got bit by the Topps trading card bug when I went to Target the other night. I bought a pack of those cards, and they are sweet.
Oh yeah,
I want to get more of those for sure.
I've been the Rise of Skywalker ones.
Yeah.
Yep, I've been hitting those as well. They're done in like the vintage design, like thick
cardstock.
Yes,
they look really good. It took me back,
those
man.
are
Just
fun.
seeing stills from movies on a card like that, like it was really, I'm into it.
Yeah,
So, I've been meaning to like start getting, like when we got those Topps, the books that came out from Gary Gaiani, I think is maybe the name of the editor. But when those books came out, I was like so into reading those books and looking at all those cards, and I really wanted to like start, going back and finding card collections and stuff, which I want to do. But yeah, these are great. I'm pretty into them. So
they're fun, and there's autograph chances as well, which is pretty exciting. I think they're probably the last Carrie Fisher autographs.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because like what they do is they have the actors sign a sticker, and then the sticker goes on the cards later.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Wow.
So that's been the Topps approach for a while. Yeah.
Oh, that's cool. Okay.
But,
all right. Last thing here, Ryan. Do you want to talk real quick about these comic reveals?
yeah. So one is we saw the what I assume is the. Well, it even says right here, not final cover, but it is a image for Star Wars Darth Vader #1. It's written by Greg Pak. It's another Darth Vader comic series. There's always going to be one of these on the shelves. I've accepted it. We've been fortunate. The first two are actually shockingly good. But there's always going to be a Darth Vader comic series on the shelf. That's just how it is.
Yeah.
Whatever. More exciting to me is April 2020, so it's a ways off, but Star Wars Dr. Aphra #1. So Dr. Aphra is getting rebooted. New creative team. Alyssa Wong is writing it, which is she's a writer I'm not familiar with. I haven't read any of her stuff. But looking at her Twitter, she seems cool. It's nice to have a female creator writing a female character. And I mean, I love what Kieran Gillen and Cy Spurrier did with Dr. Aphra. It's still my favorite Star Wars comic. But it is nice to like finally have like a female writer writing a female character.
Sure.
Yeah. So, and then Marika Cresta is an artist who I'm not familiar with. The cover here is by Valentina Reminar, who I'm not familiar with. The cover looks great. I like it a lot, but I do hope that we're still getting Aphra covers from. Oh my god, I'm just blanking on her name. Ashley. Oh no. Whoever's been doing the Dr. Aphra covers lately, because they have just been phenomenal, and I love them so much. But anyways, Dr. Aphra coming back, new number 1. We don't know what time period it's going to be. Looking at this cover image, it doesn't... I can't really tell if it's... she seems older. So I'm not sure if we're going to start getting into like a different time period with her, or these will be flashback stories, because who knows? She's got to die at some point. But yeah, like, this is exciting that this series is continuing. We have a woman writing it. We have a new number 1, so it'll be a great jumping on point for people. And April 2020, that's kind of the it's something to look forward to in Star Wars comics moving forward. So into 2020 is going to continue to be an exciting year for Star Wars, even though everything kind of ends this December. Yeah.
So the comics are resetting a little more quickly than the movies are, and some of the other material, but a reset nonetheless post Rise of Skywalker. So
yeah,
cool. Okay, well, we're gonna wrap it up there. So we will be back next week with another episode of the Blockade Runner podcast. But until then, you can catch everything we do at blockaderunnerpodcast.com. We would love to hear from you. Email us at blockaderunnerpodcast@gmail.com, or comment on Twitter at blockaderun. Ryan, you're on Twitter at
Brandwarf, BRAWNDWARF.
All right, so thanks very much for watching and or listening, and we'll be back next week with another episode.